This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. Welcome to London Fintech Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about decision intelligence in the AI era, and I'm here with Quantexa. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Quantexa are in their 10th year. They're a firm that I've been following from the beginning, arguably a bit before the beginning because we have a little bit of shared work history. And Quantexa, as it is known, is really on an amazing trajectory. They're one of the few post-pandemic UK unicorns. They did a Series F last year when many firms were being devalued. They're at the forefront of the UK's AI strategy, and they are scaling globally, well past 100 million ARR, and leading in the decision intelligence Magic Quadrant. I think that was a recent update from Gartner. I've always thought that one of Quantexa's many strengths is the energy and quality of the founding team. And the world-class product they've built, of course. But Quantexa is a friend of the podcast in that this founder and CEO, Vishal Maria, was on this show about 7 years ago before I picked up the microphone. So I'm really pleased today to be bringing the story up to date. And I'm joined today by Jamie Hutton, founding CTO, and really, in my eyes, the one who built the product. Welcome, Jamie.
Thanks very much, Tony. Great to be here.
It's great to see you. So we haven't got Vish because I think he's sort of catching up post Davos, and you've been on your travels recently as well?
Yeah, we recently did the company ski trip, which is always a highlight of the year. We take about 100 people away, and this year went to Avoriaz in France, which was a roaring success, super fun. So that was great.
No broken legs?
No broken legs. Everyone came back unscathed this time. We haven't had that in previous years. We've had a few accidents in previous years, but this year it was a full success.
Few sore heads?
Few sore heads, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I always ask people on the podcast what they do when they're not at work, and we went straight into it. So skiing's one of those things.
Skiing, yeah, absolutely.
But I think you've got a sideline as DJ as well, perhaps.
That's right, yeah. So I love a bit of skiing for sure, but DJing is something I've been doing since I was 13 years old. So, God, nearly 30 years, I can't believe it. And I've always loved it. Always loved music, always loved playing for a crowd. And DJing, I often DJ the Quantexa Christmas party, which this year we held at Coco Camden, which was a great venue to play, really fun, so really great.
And you're the tour DJ for the ski trip, aren't you?
I am indeed, yes. Everywhere we go, we normally ring up the local bar and say, if we bring 100 people, can I DJ? And usually the answer is absolutely.
So if anyone in the audience has ever been on the Quantexa ski trip or ever gets the privilege of joining, then you're going to get superstar DJ treatment from Jamie. What's your favourite track to drop?
Do you know, it's more genres, right? So my favourite type of music is bass heavy music. So anything from sort of drum and bass right through to sort of breaks or that sort of vibe. Yeah.
So my eldest, who's 15, it does a little bit of this, and I still say to him, "Is it not just playing a CD here?" Yeah. And there's more to it apparently.
There is, although I have to say in 1996 or so when I started really doing it, the technology wasn't really there. So it was much more basic and you had to do a lot more manually, whereas now the machines can do quite a lot for you.
Yeah, which is quite a good segue to this conversation because we're not here to talk about DJing,
of course,
or to talk about decision intelligence. And Quantexa, as I outlined in the intro, very much a leading technology firm in the data, in the AI space. So perhaps we should just start with, what does Quantexa do?
Yeah, so we're in the decision intelligence space. And when we say decision intelligence, it's about moving from what traditionally used to do was business intelligence. You used to present dashboards to users or present information to users for them to make a manual decision. And the world's moving more into the automated space. So we're moving into a world where you want to automate as many decisions as possible. Yeah. Now, the fundamental about decision intelligence is to make decisions based on context. And that's really what Quantexa is all about. We create context around who your customer is, who the citizen is, if you're talking about a government, understand that context and feed that into the analytical models so that instead of a human making the decision, the machine can make an accurate decision on its own. Yeah.
And I've always thought that was the Quantexa differentiator. And you and the founding team, you're not new to this, right? So in the shared history that we have at former firm, you'd already developed a product that was really doing what I think you continue to call entity data resolution. Mm-hmm. And in my head, that's just joining the dots. It's connecting multiple data sources into big data clusters and looking for the patterns. That's and right. You can score those patterns and you can find some bad stuff going on and you can find maybe some opportunities as well. Exactly. Perhaps you could expand on entity data resolution. I know that term's used quite a lot.
Yeah, of course. So I started my career, quite a long time ago. And for the moment I started, I was in the entity resolution and graph analytics space. So a real privilege to actually work in this area and actually pioneer.
Was that even a job title at that time?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And frankly, we sort of brought that as a concept to market back in those very, very early days. So super exciting times. Yeah. Entity resolution is a very simple process, really. You've got multiple systems that you'll have internally within your own organization. Your customer data, if you're a bank, you'll have payments. If you're an insurer, you'll have claims. If you're a government, you'll have government records. And they're all disparate and disconnected. Typically multiple systems, multiple formats, and multiple mentions of the same people and businesses and addresses. And that's where entity resolution comes in. It allows you to connect the dots between all of those upstream systems. So if you've got a Jamie Hutton in one system and a James Hutton in another system, you can ultimately say that is one true person. And the benefit for doing that is you can ultimately then score something that looks a bit like the real world. Yeah. So rather than trying to score a customer or a transaction, you should really try and score a person or a business or an entity that is a real world thing. And ultimately, that is what entity resolution is all about.
Joining the dots. So the analogy I like is that in very many Hollywood thriller movies, there's a lot of Post-its and newspaper articles on the wall and bits of string and pins joining things together. That's kind of what you're doing, right? That's
right. I mean, that's almost the graph stage. Almost before you even get to that, you need to understand who is Jamie Hutton, what is Quantexa Limited and what are its relationships. And then by understanding that, you can then start to bring in what we describe as graph analytics. So that's where you're not just looking at Jamie or Quantexa, you're looking at the relationships they have within the data. Yeah. So for example, Jamie Hutton being a director of Quantexa and Vishal Marriott also being a director, means there's a relationship between Vishal and I because we both share directorships in the company. So great example of a relationship. And really what we do is we then analyze that massive graph to look for interesting patterns, whether it's the good, the bad, or anything in between.
And you won't find, or you won't know what's in the data network or data cluster unless you go to that first, second, third degree of referral and join the dots.
Exactly.
And I've seen several of the Quantexa data clusters. I've seen some of the implementations that our team have built, and there's surprising things that you put a potentially a bad actor, you put a person at the center of the cluster, and you can spider out on their company directorships and money movements and relationships that they have by joining on things like home addresses and telephones and dates of birth. And I think you've built quite a sort of forensic matching engine, if you like, to do that.
Yeah, and everyone thinks matching is quite simple. I mean, at the end of the day, you're comparing names or comparing addresses, but actually it's really complicated.
Yeah.
A lot of systems that came at entity resolution, if you do a market scan of entity resolution, the vast majority came out of a space called master data management. And if you're familiar with master data management, this is about creating a single customer view. Well, Quantexa actually came at it from a completely different angle. We didn't just care about resolving the customer. We need to understand who your customer's customer is. So we need to be able to do things like supply chain analysis. If you're a bank, we need to understand who's at the end of the payment. If you're an insurer, we need to know who are the claimants, who are the witnesses, who are the people involved in this claims, the suppliers. So we had to cast the net a lot wider when we thought about entity resolution, not just focusing on customer data, but a much broader set of data. And we typically also, by the way, bring in third-party and external data. So sometimes, you ask the question, how many customers could a big organization have? If you're a large bank, even the most large in the world could have maybe 100 million customers. When you think about payments, that's billions of records. When you think about external companies that are on global registries, that could be 250 million companies and 1 billion directors. So we had to design it from the ground up to be able to work at scale.
Yeah, and solving very real-world problems. So, I mean, the reason that your enterprise clients buy the system and are getting such great results from it is they're solving real things. So, should I bank this customer?
Absolutely.
Should I offboard this one because they've done something bad? Is there a money laundering pattern in the data here? Are we seeing fraud? It's those things.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, we started Quantexa really focusing on the finding bad guys in data problem. Finding criminal activity, finding fraud, money laundering. That's where we started. But what we realized a few years into the company was that same data foundation that can be used, that view of who is Jamie, who's Quantexa, and who do they know, is actually really powerful for every phase of the customer lifecycle.
Yes.
Whether you're onboarding a customer, whether you're understanding what products you should give to them, whether you're deciding what their risk is, or whether you're choosing to offboard them, You want to be able to leverage that full context of who is the customer, who do they know, and therefore are they positive, negative, or somewhere in between.
And you can use that for growth scenarios as well. I think we could talk about this because I think it's been headlined publicly more than once. One of the big UK banks had this scenario, which I love it. It's like, we bank this guy. He's a member of, I think it was either the golf club or the Aston Martin Owners Club or something with this other guy, and they have a connection. So the relationship manager for the first client can ask and say, hey, look, I can see you bank this guy, or he's got a shared company directorship or whatever it may be.
Exactly.
Are you okay if we approach him? And they found tens, hundreds of millions
of benefit as a result of this approach. And the great example, as you rightly say, we can connect up corporate registry so we can understand company ownership, but we can then connect it to a bank's corporate customers, so we understand, well, which of these companies do you bank?
Yeah.
And also the individual customers, whether it's retail, whether it's products like high net wealth type customers, we can combine all that together. And then if you say, well, interestingly, we have a high net wealth individual, Vishal Maria, connected to this company that we don't have a banking relationship with, maybe we should serve that up as an organization we want to service with banking products. Or do the opposite, which is, we're already banking Quantexa Limited, but we're not banking Director X. Maybe we should give them some products. So it's a really nice way. Traditionally people would do analytics where they'd be served a set of leads that they had to then cold call. This company would be great to do some more business with, but then you haven't got an in. Whereas with Quantexa, you get that in, if that makes sense.
And how many of your clients are really leaning into and implementing that use case? And this is just my perception, that you are across I don't know what the number is, but a large proportion of the major financial institutions and government, telco, other sectors, and there is a strong focus on risk and fraud and those use cases. Don't hear quite so much about the about finding new customers but is that fair?
I think that's partly because of our history, right? So obviously for the first sort of 5 years of our company, we were really focused on the finding bad guys in data type problem. So as a result, the sort of going after the new customer acquisition or the referral-based selling, as we call it, is just more new to us. So we've got a number of marquee customers, and they're delivering a huge amount of value, or our system is delivering a huge amount of value for them. But it's a growth space for us, for sure. The other thing I'd say, actually, just as a slight side point, is that we often actually are seeing quite an interest from what I would describe as the CDO community, the Chief Data Office, or CDAO, Chief Data and Analytics Office, where we might have originally started in a particular pointed use case, financial crime as an example. But the CDO is saying, well, actually, we could take that and make that horizontal layer across our whole enterprise. Improve our data estate, create data products that you can then use for all your use cases. So even if we're not the ones producing the referral-based model, we are actually improving the data estate, which then feeds into their own model. So we can work in both those ways.
And we're going to talk about AI in a few minutes, but AI-ready data is a fundamental. And I think what you're describing there is that sort of data fabric approach to having consistent, accurate data to feed the models. And I'd like to come back to that in a minute. Before we jump right into today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsor, NextWave. NextWave is an award-winning consultancy that is helping many of the world's leading banks, investment managers, and insurers deliver on their growth, efficiency, risk, and control goals and transform their businesses. With a senior team who have come from MD-level positions in major firms like HSBC, Barclays, and UBS, NextWave has both the deep industry expertise and the hands-on capabilities in AI, data, and automation to drive real results. More business outcomes and less PowerPoint from the consulting experience, as their clients like to say. NextWave has moved 2-week manual processes to 5-minute agentic automations, rescued global banking regulatory control programs, and digitized deal platforms, sustainability, and regulatory reporting systems. And they do much of this with hands-on engineering capabilities on leading technologies, which include ServiceNow, Alteryx, Quantexa, and Camunda. So if a modern and specialist alternative to the big brand consulting model sounds appealing, one which covers the full life cycle of strategy specialists and solutions, but with small practitioner teams, rapid delivery, and a better price point, then perhaps you should talk to NextWave. Visit nxwave.com to find out more and get in touch. That's nxwave.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Well, what do you think is the biggest problem that that enterprises have with their data? Because you are working across multiple data sources, structured, and I think in the current product some unstructured as well. Right. But what's the biggest problem that people have?
Mostly it's really two things. It's siloed data. It's data that's disconnected and frankly wasn't meant to be joined together. Yeah. So, hopefully as an organization you can connect your customer data really well. But when you think about your let's take a bank, the payments, the counterparties, you don't have a good key that says this is Jamie Hutton or this is Quantexa. Equally then when you bring in third-party data, that data was never designed to be joined with your system. So you don't have a key to use. So ultimately, siloed data is the first problem. And then the second problem is data quality or data completeness. Yeah. One of the really interesting things about the way we tackled entity resolution, and just going back again to our history, because we were focused on those finding bad guys, you've got to understand when a criminal is trying to get into your system, they will do lots of things like provide as little information as possible, manipulate their details, and essentially mess up their data quality intentionally. I'll be Jamie, James, and Jim. I'll be at 1A, 1B, and 1C, the high street. I'll change information because I want to evade that really simple basic matching. So we had to design our entity resolution to work in the space of poor data quality. And what that means is when we actually just face poor data quality that is systemic in a customer system, we're able to deal with it natively because we designed the system to work in that way.
So you're ready for the reality of corporate data.
Exactly.
One of the big banks that we've done a lot of consulting with over the years, and it may not be true these days, famously had about 800 different applications running in the markets division. And really, wrapping your head around that. So how do you deal with all the variety of different formats and structures?
It's a really great question. One of the things that we brought to market about 4 years ago was, we call it Context Data Fusion, but ultimately what it does is you can point it at your source data, your source system, and it will automatically say, okay, that looks like a name, that looks like an address, that looks like a phone number. And the benefit to that is in the past, traditional systems, you had to do a massive ETL data transformation job. Take all your data, map it into the vendor's schema, and ultimately you could spend like 2 or 3 years doing data mapping and data remediation programs. So what we've done is we've tried to eliminate that. We point our system at the data. It automatically tags, obviously with human in the loop, so you can override it, and it then brings that data into the platform without having to do that big ETL transformation. So that allows us to roll it out to more systems more quickly than you might traditionally have been able to do with traditional MDM or ER platforms.
And you're layering onto cloud data platforms and data lakes.
That's a really important point, actually. A lot of our customers are standing up their preferred data environments. That could be AWS, GCP, Azure, but it also could be products like Databricks or Snowflake or other data platforms. And what we wanted to be able to do was work natively and interoperate with them. So actually a lot of what we do is we push our software into those environments for execution. So we're not even lifting the data out and putting it somewhere else. We're leaving the data in place, enriching it, and creating those nicely resolved entity data products and graph data products that can then be used for a wide range of use cases.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked quite a lot about the problem and the product, essentially, the solution. And as I noted when we opened, you're 10 years in, it's a hell of a growth journey for anyone who's been watching and sort of been, to some extent, on the bus. And there's a lot more ahead, I think. But the world's changing very fast as well. So I'd like to talk for a few minutes about sort of growth story to date and really what would be very interesting is to understand what you see coming over the horizon, but we'll get to that. Yeah. How did this all start?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but today is our 10-year anniversary. Literally today.
Really?
Yeah, literally today. Got an email from Vish this morning, went out to the whole company. Congratulations, 10-year
fantastic.
anniversary.
So to be having this conversation today.
Great day to have this conversation, exactly. So how did it start? I suppose it started with a set of founders, there were 6 of us, who had worked together since 2004, so for about 12 years. So we had always been in this space. In fact, we'd innovated this space of using entity resolution and graph technology to ultimately, for the first parts of our career, finding bad guys in data. That's the way I best describe it. What we were seeing was we were doing this work on what I would describe as legacy or platforms which were sort of not open source, not open interoperable in the same way as customers were moving. And in about 2016, there was really this adoption of things like Hadoop, things like Spark, that were driving customers to use more open source technology. And what we felt was that was the perfect catalyst for us to take all those learnings that we had around how do you connect this data and do it at scale, but to take it into an open and interoperable platform that could really sit nicely in a customer's future platform strategy and ecosystem. So that was one of the catalysts. I guess the second one was, as a group of 6, the projects and the customer relationships that we'd built and the, I suppose, the trust that we'd gained with our customers was really key. So once we started this journey, we had a lot of customers who were monitoring us and really following us very, very closely and really keen to quite quickly jump on board. So it was a really exciting way to sort of start the business, I guess.
Yeah. So you sort of proven product market fit because the sort of, I'm going to characterize the batch version of a similar product you developed an earlier firm. And so everyone really understood this thing we've been talking about, entity data resolution, perhaps more than anyone else.
Exactly.
And, right time, right place, and already proven demand from the market.
Right. Exactly. But I think the thing that we saw that was missing, not just the open source part of it, but the ability to use this as a single capability for many different things. As I mentioned, in my past lives, it was all about one use case, finding criminal activity. Yeah. When we created Quantexa, we wanted it to be much more broad. We wanted it to be this decision intelligence platform as we're describing it. Now, that presents a few challenges that you have to work through. What you tend to find, this is through our experience working with many organizations, this idea that you can have a single customer view or single entity view for every use case across the enterprise, it doesn't work. You have to have different views of the world depending on the problem you're trying to solve. So taking a really simple example, if I'm looking for trying to onboard a customer, I want to make sure that when I say Jamie and James are the same, that they're definitely the same. As I start to get into risk decisioning or finding the criminals, I need to cast the net wider. I need to dial the fuzzy dial up because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm trying to optimize for two different things. So this idea of having a single view fundamentally doesn't work. So what we innovated in the very early stage of Quantexa was something we coined as dynamic entity resolution. We are the only people on the market doing it. We were the first to market doing it. And ultimately, what it allows you to do is serve up a view of Jamie for MDM or for customer onboarding, which is different from the view of Jamie for criminal activity detection. And that means you can have one instance of Quantexa servicing all the different parts of the organization.
And the implementation process has been and remains, I think, very much focused around those scoring packs and tuning the alerting and the network tolerances for different scenarios.
Exactly. Our view, again, the entity resolution will vary across the use cases, but to be honest with you, we've now done so many of these projects, we've kind of baked that into the software. What's the next bit is the graphs. Which of the relationships that are relevant, and that will vary massively on different use cases, right? Which links do I want to follow? Which links are uninteresting? Depends on the question you're trying to answer. And then, of course, the final bit is that decision-making. Those we call them decision packs. But ultimately, this allows us to take our learnt IP, the things that we know detect risk or find new opportunity from our customers, and embed it back in the product so that we can give an out-of-the-box set that customers can then extend, add to, and build their own models on top of.
Yeah. So 6 founders, kitchen table, maybe a bit like this one.
It was actually our kitchen island back in Clapham. Laura and our island. Yeah, exactly where we did a lot of the meetings. Wow. We sort of seemed to be the hub of where all of the founders were. So we did a lot around our kitchen island.
I got a call from Vish, a former firm, saying, "Can you come over? I think we're going to go alone. What do you think?" I thought, well, if you can't, nobody can.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember actually finding the Quantexa name and Quantexa domain name sat at our island, and that's where we came from. So super exciting. Sat around that island and really sort of planning the future.
And and this is for all the kitchen table entrepreneurs out there who are listening to this episode, right? So and we've done this with the NextWave business as well. You literally come up with a name. Can I register that? How can I get a URL?
Honestly, it really was so important to us that we could have a .com that was easy and memorable. And the other thing I'd say is that back at the time we were floating ideas around a company name that was more descriptive of what it does, but actually this idea of having something which is fairly generic actually really allows you to adapt the business as it grows, right? So
well, it's quite clever because it's a little bit sort of Google-esque in the fact that it's a made-up word, but it's about context.
Exactly. And if you want to know where it really came from, It was the quantitative analysis of Exadata. But
Oh,
we sort of
there you go.
we retrofitted that once we found the name, if we're really honest.
Was that Felix? who
Yeah,
came up with that?
well, it was a bit of a combination. Let's say it was a combination. Yeah.
Okay, so you've launched, right?
Yeah.
You've registered the company, you got the name, you know what you're going to do. What happens over the next 12, 24 months? Because I know you had early client interest. Hey, if you build this thing, sort of we're in. But you've got to build a product, and you've got to fund that, and you've been through 6 investment rounds.
That's right. Yeah.
So just tell us a bit about that
Yeah,
first stage.
so for sure. So we were basically sort of seed funded by the co-founders, and obviously a lot of us took no salary for the first year or so of the company to sort of bootstrap it. We had a sort of dual strategy at the beginning. It's quite an interesting one. I don't know if lots of people know this, but we were sort of running a high-end consultancy alongside building the product, and the former was paying for the latter a little bit, and that ultimately allowed us to, for the first year, along with some of the seed investment and salary sacrifice, to really not take any external investment at all, which obviously really helps because it allows you to build out a product. Obviously, it's an early version for sure, whilst also being engaged with some of your key target customers.
Yep.
So that means you get really direct access to what are their key challenges, what are the evolving risks, what are the evolving things that they're looking for, and you can feed that directly back into the product development process. So that first year was really quite an exciting one, where we were scaling the company as fast as we could to build out the technology, but at the same time keeping it affordable based on the sort of front side of the business. So it's quite an interesting sort of blend there. We then had our first major customer was HSBC, and actually they chose to take a 10% stake in the company. So they were our first investors. So it's a really exciting time. But
not many fintechs can say that.
Correct. And I think this was a really key strategic decision of the company. So many other startups will start up with a small product and take it to small organizations first, and then try and grow to the tier ones. Yeah. We did it the exact opposite way. Yeah. We tried to build a product from day one that was designed for the most complex organizations in the world. And that then allows us to prove it at that scale and ultimately simplify it and bring it down to different markets. So we always knew from day one that the product scaled to tier 1 data. Things like that, traditional startups don't need to worry about. They're just dealing with the small guys. So I think it created a really solid foundation for the company, which then allowed us to scale really, really well.
Yeah, and it's not only creates a product that's enterprise ready, it's market validation. When you turn up and say, have you got any clients?
Yeah,
got HSBC.
Exactly. So then when we came to our Series A and B rounds, having a couple of marquee customers who are household names, you cannot underestimate that.
Yeah. It's what I'm trying to do with a consulting company at the moment. So we're sort of working for the world's largest financial institutions, but we have a more competitive consulting landscape, I think, than perhaps you have with the Quantexa positioning. Yeah. But there's some much bigger companies that we come up against all the time.
I'm sure, yeah. And look, we do as well. There are some big behemoths out there that will come head to head with in areas. But what I think is quite interesting is we can play in what I describe as 2 different spaces. We can play in the vertical space, which is Tony, I will solve your problem for you, whether it's financial crime, customer acquisition, or whatever, as well as the platform play, which is we'll get your data ready for AI, we'll improve your data estate for all of the different use cases you may have.
Yeah, and you talked about that sort of bootstrap period where you were getting some consulting fees. And I remember talking to Vish about that. He said, I've been on a pretty healthy day rate, but I'm giving it all to Jamie to build the product.
Exactly right. That's exactly what we were doing in the early days. And then we had some projects where we would develop the early version of the product. We were essentially doing a half consultancy, half project, product type delivery. And it was, it's a great way to bootstrap the company.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that my observation, sort of secret to your success, this is another one for the fintech entrepreneurs out there, is the amount of commercial DNA you had in the team at the beginning. Because there are by any measures, and I've heard a couple of stats, 15,000 or 75,000 fintechs out there, and many of them are long on idea and product. So it's all about I'll build it and they'll come.
That's right.
But what Quantexa was doing, and I think the marquee lighthouse client being HSBC is a sort of proof point on that.
Absolutely.
You were selling from day one.
Yeah. Right. Build it and they will come is almost the opposite strategy to what we did. We built it hand in hand with the customers we were trying to target. So very different way of working, and it ultimately sort of guaranteed a lot of early success for us.
Yeah, and as you've scaled out, a large part of that footprint, as I understand it, is the sales team. I mean, you've always had a very commercial focused sales team.
We have, absolutely, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's probably 20% of our business or so, but it's a commercial focus is key. But do you know what's even more important is customer satisfaction and delivering for our customers. I'm incredibly proud to see over the course of our 10-year history, we have almost no churn. Almost no churn. Once a customer is a customer, they are a customer, and they remain a customer. And the reason for that is that fundamentally we deliver on our promise, and I think we've always done that from literally day one, which is key.
And I get this a lot from successful founders and senior folks in the sector. I spoke to Andrew McKibben from Bank of America's international CIO, Bank of America, on this show, and it's one of my favourite conversations, and folks can look it up. Yeah. But he just said, really, really, really listen to your client. Exactly. And I think there were 3 reallys in there. Yeah. And I love that. I thought, this is someone who's really, using both ears and really tuned in to what the clients need.
For sure. I think that is one of the keys to our success.
Yeah. What are you most proud about over the last 10 years?
I think, look, the people that we've built it has to be my number one. Yeah. We've built an incredibly strong team that I'm very, very proud of, both in my area and more broadly across the whole company. In the very early days, I remember in the first year I was involved in literally every single interview, no matter whether it was a graduate right up to a senior. And I think that builds a really strong foundation, because then when they start recruiting, they know what you're looking for. So I think the team has to be the number one thing. I think in the more recent past, this sort of validation as being put top right on the Gartner quadrant is absolutely something we're so proud of as a company.
And that's a new category, isn't it?
Almost the category that we helped create, right? Yeah. I mean, we really were pioneering. We pioneered this thing. We described it in the early days as contextual decision intelligence.
I remember that.
To make sure we really underscore, build context first. We went to the analysts, and decision intelligence was something that we were sort of explaining to them, contextual decision intelligence, and they, I suppose, broadened it to just general decision intelligence. But it's certainly something that we were very key on building out ourselves, and sort of driving forward as a segment in its own right. And then to see so many other organizations, big and small, some much bigger than us, starting to use the terms decision intelligence. Amazing validation, right? Yeah. For a company that started as the 6 of us to have essentially a quadrant that fundamentally we helped to shape, and then the big behemoths following suit. It's great.
Yeah, that must feel good for sure.
Yeah.
And it's not all been plain sailing, I'm sure. So biggest challenge or obstacle or wrong turn or bad decision along the way?
Do you know, I don't know if I'd describe it as a wrong turn, because we wouldn't be here today without it. Yeah. But I think I will talk about something which is an area that we continue to invest in. Think about the challenge that we faced back in 2016 and 2017 when we were working with a, frankly, immature product. It was brand new, right? Yeah. And we were trying to service the biggest organizations in the world.
Yeah.
What we had to do to make the product suitable for those organizations was make it customizable, highly configurable, it's extensible, so that a customer could add their own capabilities into it. And that served us so well. For the first 5 years of our company, we were going after all the big tier ones. All of them had custom requirements, specific unique needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we absolutely intentionally went down the route of make it extensible, make it customizable. But as we then grow, you obviously need to package, you need to make things configurable, you need to make things quicker and easier to deploy. So there was always that sort of tension. Yes. And I suppose we've, over the last few years, we've really been doubling down on that simplification, making the product quick and easy to deploy, making it cheaper to manage, reducing TCO. So I wouldn't say it was a wrong turn, because we wouldn't be here without it. If you try to package a product on day one, and ultimately back in 2016, people were just looking at feature comparisons, and you'd never win on that. So it was the right decision, but ultimately it isn't a wrong turn, but it's something that we have to continue to invest in.
So it got quite complicated quickly. You had a lot of jigsaw pieces, and,
that's right.
And now you're sort of normalizing and packaging and productizing.
And you know what? Standards. We've also learned product market fit, right? So in the early days, we didn't know exactly what a customer might need, whereas now we've got hundreds of customers, 30 of the top 50 banks, I think, if I get the number right, leverage Quantexa. We know what they need.
Yes.
We can package it. We can create it in a way that you can ultimately quickly deploy, drag and drop UI configure. So that's really what we've been focused on.
Yeah. And you were talking about building an enterprise-grade product from the beginning and now how that's evolving. And this was something I really wanted to talk about for a minute, was how do you future-proof? Because you're 10 years in, right? And you discover at the beginning that this entity resolution expertise that the team has and the model that you have has huge potential. And there's things like Elastic and Spark out there. And hey, guess what? We can do this now in a scalable tech environment and do it in real time. And we never used to be able to do that. But you have to make technology choices, right? And I know that I don't know whether this is still the case, but a lot of the core of the product is built on Scala code, which is very functional. It's quite difficult to learn. It's a bit nichey. And this is where you'll probably explain the tech layers a bit beyond my grasp. But the question is really, how do you make the right tech bets in an environment that's moving so fast, where people are saying, I'm going to build everything in this, and then that evaporates with either the next frontier model AI that comes out, or that cloud data platform is now not this year's product, it was last year's product.
Absolutely. Open and interoperability, I think, is the key answer to that question. We have always, from day one, wanted to allow our customers to use the right tools for the job. So in the early days, whether it was Python or R or those sorts of environments for building models, right now through to things like your Databricks environments or your hyperscaler environments, we always had that open interoperability, which means that yes, things will change, but fundamentally, if you build the right context and you can make that available to those tools, then it's not a battle. You're not trying to fight between the technology choices. We've been very lucky, I think, that maybe it's not luck, maybe it's intentional, but when we selected the technology that we're based on, 10 years on, we're still on that technology, and we have no intention of moving off it. And I think that's because, do you remember I said right at the beginning, we wanted to build our product on open source that was widely adopted, and that's exactly what we did. And I think we made some amazing bets that have really paid off, which is fantastic. On the Scala side, a really interesting debate, this one. We build all our code in Scala. Part of the reason for that was, if you're familiar, Spark, which is what we leverage for our batch stage processing, actually is built in Scala. So it was a really great way of us building a product that could execute in both the batch world, in the Spark world, as well as the real-time world, without having to write it twice or rebuild it. So it was actually a really, really key sort of USP and selling point for us. But we understand that our customers shouldn't need Scala skills, right? They should be using the tools that they're familiar with, whether it's Python or even just configuration and nice drag and drop UIs for doing that. So really, over the course of the years, in the early days where you might have used Scala to extend the product, nowadays you're using Python, you're using configuration to extend the product.
Yeah. Open, interoperable. I mean, I think that's what's helped you succeed over quite a relatively significant period of time in developing the product and still be relevant on the right architecture. But how do you stay on the front foot, though? Have you got an innovation or a horizon scanning team or someone who's out there checking out all these new technologies that are evolving?
We've got a dedicated innovation function in Quantexa. We call them Q Labs, but they are there specifically to look at brand new horizon stuff, the 0 to 1, the stuff that we don't know will work. When we make a bet in core R&D, it's usually gone through a robust product management process, and we know it's going to work. We need to be able to also have a separate function which isn't targeted in the same way. They're trying to try out brand new things and see what works, and that's what our innovation function is all about. We also have a huge amount of innovation in the unstructured and LLM space. So we have a whole team dedicated to the unstructured data processing and leveraging the best of large language models for all of the things that Quantexa does. So we try and stay as ahead as we can to ensure that obviously we don't get overtaken or don't fall behind.
Yeah. So what are the Q Labs team looking at? I mean, you mentioned LLMs. I mean, I had a conversation on this show last week about quantum computing. I don't know quite how far into the sort of bleeding edge you are, but are there any interesting things that you can talk about that the team are investigating?
A big area at the moment, of course, is the Agentic AI space and how we can build autonomous agents that can take action on behalf of users, obviously continuing to leverage the really powerful context that Quantexa provides. So that's been a really powerful piece of work. We're also looking at things like how we can use AI to automatically generate analytics. So rather than a data scientist building machine learning models and working out how best to build which features and scores, how can you leverage AI in that space? We've got this thing called Scoring Labs that we're working on. So just a couple of examples that we're working on.
Yeah, and obviously the agentic opportunity is something that the whole market's looking at, and you could see very clearly how this plays into your space. So an agent that writes suspicious activity reports, that's one of your big use cases, right? And you've got all the data, so very easy to see how that could be deployed, I think.
Yeah, look, it's the usual. I suppose what we're going to market with is the adage of garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. If you can create the right data foundation for AI, then you give AI the best chance of success. If you put AI on disparate, disconnected, low quality data and you just try and ask it questions, it's honestly going to end up producing the wrong answers.
So given all of that, and at the time of this recording, there's been a very sharp market shock around SaaS companies. There's some headlines are calling it the SaaS apocalypse, and share prices are down. And it's that SaaS software is going to be layered by the AI and the value and taken out in many cases. And there's some examples of some of the frontier models that are really neutralizing maybe some of the legal analytical tech and things like that. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there's a lot of hype, and obviously the news providers always like a good front page story. But I think there's a little bit of truth to it as well. So I guess in the olden days, people used to look at software on things like feature and functionality. Yeah. Now, what does this do? Does it tick all my boxes? I think we're moving away from that world, because honestly, you can vibe code a very nice UI that does exactly what your business wants and has all the features you need and none of the features you don't relatively easily. So if your SaaS solution is a thin veil of a bit of a better user experience and a few extra features on top of a set of data, then I think there is some risk in the business. Yeah. But I do think that almost it's a shift. Like what this is producing is the ability for those companies that embed AI at the core of their platform, of their SaaS platform, will be the ones that succeed. And ultimately, moving away from feature functionality being the key thing people are measuring on to value that is delivered and interoperability and things like that. I think with the advent of AI, integrating systems has become trivial. The AI can literally integrate across multiple systems automatically for you. So that interoperability, and I think you're going to see lots of SaaS companies that have modular building blocks that form parts of wider solutions as well. So I think that's a key area for those like very user experience focused SaaS companies, is to make sure it's sort of open, interoperable, and at its core can integrate with lots of other systems. A bit like Quantexa, we're obviously not a SaaS company. We're obviously not in that space. But what we're doing is embedding essentially AI into the core of the platform to make it ultimately resolve the entities better, build the graphs better, and do better analytics, but also making that available via things like agent to agent and MCP to other services, so that you can integrate Quantexa with your own agentic frameworks, etc.
So you become you are a critical part of the agentic ecosystem. Yeah. And there's also a huge amount of IP and know-how in the product as a result of 10 years of tuning entity resolutions, which I think is unique. So right. I think my sense would be you've got a pretty strong moat around what you're doing.
It's really interesting when we speak to customers. Everyone is under pressure to adopt AI and transform their business. Yeah. But then you go to the chief data officer and he says, but my data's in a mess.
There you go.
Like how... I know you want me to use more AI, and I know that I need to use more AI, and it's going to fundamentally transform the business. But how do I do that when my data's not in a good shape?
Yeah.
So that's where Quantexa fits in. We create that trusted data foundation, which can then be leveraged by the AI.
Yeah. So we're going to time out in a few minutes. We've got places to go. But I do want to ask you, what's next from Quantexa? Obviously, you've got your big annual conference.
Yeah, it'd be remiss of me not to
time.
mention that. So coming up on 3rd of March, we've got our annual conference, QuanCon we call it. We've been running it since, I think, 2017 or 2018. Yeah. So we're going to be showcasing some really great new innovations. We're going to be talking about Agentic AI and how Quantexa's rich contextual data can power new Agentic AI solutions. And we're going to also, if you remember, I talked about that simplification journey. How can you deploy a decision intelligence system simply, quickly, and without any sort of customizations and doing it all drag and drop? And so we're going to be showing a lot of that. So for anyone who would like to come, please register. QuanCon is available for registration at the moment, and we'd love to see you there, either in person or online. It's happening in London.
And I'll be there with the NextWave team. Are you doing the live demo again this year? The famous
Always
Jamie live demo?
Always do. Ever since the first one, I've run live demos. It's absolutely terrifying, but touch wood, they've always gone fine so far. It's funny, though, with the advent of AI, obviously an LLM isn't deterministic. It's going to give you a different answer every time. Anything can happen, so you've got to be there to see it.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah. And if that doesn't get the crowds in, I don't know what will.
Yeah, exactly.
So we touched on a bit of it while we were talking about the growth story today. But top tips for fintech founders, and we covered such a lot, but if there were maybe 3 things that you'd say to someone who wants to start up?
Get the right product market fit is absolutely number one. And I think to do that, you have to have really good early customer engagement, and customer satisfaction is key. Make sure you deliver on your promise. Those are my top 3.
Okay. So all 3 of them around the customer,
They really are. They really are. Ultimately, you can build the greatest tech in the world, but if no one's going to buy it, company's not viable.
Yeah. Any predictions for 2026? It is a fast-moving space. Anything you think is going to happen this year?
This will be the year, I think, of Agentic AI solutions. I think you're going to have agents which take on a load of the traditional laborious work that people would have done. I think we're not going to get to AGI this year, but I do think that you're going to have verticalized AI agents which do an unbelievably good job at the thing that they are asked to do. I think that's where we're at for 26.
Lots ahead. Yeah. Okay. And anything that you're reading or listening to that you might recommend to the audience?
I've got young kids, so actually one of the things I'm reading at the moment, other than lots of bedtime stories, which are obviously extremely exciting, is something called The Anxious Generation. Really interesting book, maybe a bit scary, just about the impact of smartphones and social media on kids. And, we're getting to our age, ours are 8 and 6, where, people at school in the next year or so are starting to get phones, and I think the impact that can have on a kid and a child and their ability to free play is something that everyone needs to be aware of. So it's a really interesting book, and I definitely encourage parents of young children to read it.
Yeah, we'll look that up and put it in the notes. My 2 are 15 and 13, and they've been really guinea pigs for the smartphone generation. So coupled with digital learning through COVID, and then getting smartphones whilst they're also trying to figure out really how dangerous these things are. It's very difficult.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's that balance of in the past you had sort of personal outdoor freedom. We'd go out and play in the street, and our parents wouldn't really know where we are. And now it's almost switched from we don't want to do that because there's dangers there, but actually the question is, are there bigger dangers on the online space?
We don't want to just sit in your bedroom on
right
either.
And you've got full freedom on the online space when perhaps it would have been better to have it. Anyway, so it's a really interesting book, and I'd encourage people to read it.
Yeah, super. And if folks want to find out more about Quantexa or about you, Jamie?
Of course, please obviously check our website. We've obviously got loads of information on there, including the sign up for QuanCon. Also, encourage anyone who wants to learn more about decision intelligence, have a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant on that. Great report, which I would encourage everyone to read. So, those 2.
Yeah, and Jamie and the team, just super approachable, super nice people. So look them up on LinkedIn, and I'm just full of admiration for where you've got to so far and what's ahead. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tony. Really appreciate being here.